And we're live. Welcome everyone to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, August 17th. We'll be following along in the agenda that was created in the RFC issue 628. Apologies for the lateness there. I also have copy and pasted the meeting notes doc and to chat. Feel free to add yourselves as attendees there. Quick reminder, these calls are live streamed and recorded on YouTube, so please be mindful of what you say, what you can and can't say. Also, quick reminder for folks, these calls are governed under a code of conduct. We ask you to please be kind to each other and respectful as others are speaking. Please raise your hand when someone else is talking and we'll call on you. And just wanted to give the floor quickly for any announcements that folks might have. If there isn't anything, what I'll say is try to grab the latest NPM CLI version. We've been making improvements to NPM Explain, NPM LS, which we'll talk about a little bit more here as well. I know that one of the items on the agenda here was some updates to that. So yeah, feel free to grab the latest. We're constantly publishing new versions every Wednesday. So right after this call, usually a release will go out. And as also a quick update, we will probably be updating the public calendar. So if you're subscribed to, I believe, the old npmjs.com public calendar, there will probably be a new one generated for next week. So just be mindful, if you click the link on the README in the next week or so, the subscription and the calendar might change. So I'll create an issue and pin it also in the RFC's repo for folks, just so you have the latest calendar, public calendar that we support. That usually has these calls on it, as well as the releases that we're cutting are usually are added as events on that calendar. So just quick heads up there. And yeah, anybody else have any other announcements they want to share? If not, we can dive into the agenda. It's pretty small today, so I shuffled things a bit so we give the most amount of time, I believe, to the last two items. I don't think we're probably going to dive into PR 23, which is the adding signal bin packages, too deep. I know some Microsoft folks were interested in this previously, and it's something that I think we can have discussions about async. But we'll use the majority of the time today for, I believe, the RFC 6.6 towards the end for linking packages to build using build attestation. So first item that we have here is the including context that a module is overridden in NPM LS, explain and explain. I think, Milf, did you want to just quickly share the work that you did there?
Sure. So I went the simplest route possible for now. I believe I linked to the pull request in the NPM in the RFC's repo. Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up here. So for LS, it's just going to put a label. If the node was overridden, it's just a simple little gray label that says overridden next to it. This is here. I will link the pull request in the chat because there's a couple of screenshots in it. Okay, so the top screenshot there is for NPM LS, which, like I said, just puts the overridden label on the node itself. For NPM explain, it puts the overridden on the node itself, and then it also tells you which edge, the line after the path there is the edge. So it shows you that it was overridden, shows you what the new spec is and what the old spec is. And then for query, it will just return any node that is marked as being overridden. So fairly straightforward, not a whole lot there for it, but seems to do the trick.
Awesome. Sorry, what's this say?
Off topic.
Cool. Thank you so much for getting this landed. I know Tierney had also noted that was an amazing turnaround to land this. So yeah, we're obviously trying to bubble up more context to end users about the state of their depths, and this definitely helps with explaining exactly how overrides are being applied. So thank you, Neil, for digging in here and helping improve essentially the LS experience. So that's great. Did you say, did that land last week, or it's going to land in today's release?
It'll be in today's release.
Awesome. Cool. Any comments or any other feedback on that from folks? I believe Tierney already closed that issue, so I pulled off the agenda label, so we won't have to bring it up next week. If we can, we'll quickly jump into the next discussion. This is the only registry dependencies. I'm not sure if Owen's on the call. I don't see him today. But I had a quick update here. I have kicked off a work in progress hack and doc for something called audit policies. So this is sort of tied together with this concept of gating, or trying to bubble up information about which, almost like this ESLint style logging or erroring based on sort of queries. Oh, there's Owen, great. So this might be helpful, Owen, this work in progress hack and doc that I've linked here in the meeting notes. I'll share the meeting notes here again for you. I'm not sure if you had any updates that you want to share on the only registry depths RFC.
Yeah, I just tweaked the query thanks to for the feedback, so I think it's ready to go.
Cool. I haven't had a chance to review it. Did you do that this week, or I guess since last week?
I tweaked the so I pretty much presented everything last week, and then the only question I had was, can I refine the specific query? So it was like literally just a one-line change since last week.
Cool.
It was basically just take the root and just do like is type. That was the, because we wanted to get everything, not exclude anything. So that was the one delta since last week.
Okay. So maybe just quick update for folks then. If you can, please review that RC so we can potentially pull it in and ratify it, and then hopefully get some work done around it. Oh, and are you willing to see this all the way through, like actually do some of the engineering to consume query and implement it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'll be a first timer, so I'll, but not unfamiliar at all with like, all the Node stuff. So yeah, I'd like to give it a try, maybe a quick pairing session just to get an idea of, if it's like a small, medium, or large, and that could be the difference whether my employer sponsors it or I just do it on the weekends, but I'd like to very much. So I'll have that chat this weekend either way. And but yeah.
Cool.
I mean, does it seem relatively straightforward, like from what we've talked about so far, in terms of like implementing?
I think so. Yeah. The RC isn't super long, and like the idea that we'll introduce essentially like a new flag, only registry depths, makes a lot of sense. And then like the underpinning potentially can get reworked to use the audit policies work, I think. So I'm not sure if we have to like wait for that, or we should wait for that to land. But yeah, we can probably like talk about that async. It'd be good if you aren't already in the Slack, the Node tooling, or the Node.js Slack channels or Slack organizations. Those are good places to poke our team. There's NPM channels there that our team monitors. So just for like, synchronous chats, synchronous, asynchronous chat. Outside of this call, it's a good way to collaborate with us, and we can like schedule a call or get like parent time queued up with you and somebody from our team, just to get you started, because we obviously want to increase like the number of contributors to the CLI. So yeah,
cool. Yeah, I think I'm in the Node.js one, so I'll definitely yeah, assuming there's no fundamental objections to the RFC. Yeah, I'll set up a chat to start spiking on that. So yeah, definitely let me know if you see any kind of showstoppers. Otherwise, I'll you know, in the next few days, I'll kind of assume that's the source of truth and engage in earnest with the team on that front. So
cool. Any other feedback on that from folks? If not, we can jump into.
I think last week you mentioned there already was a follow-up issue to kind of get more into like the real like configuration meat and potatoes of this. Could you just link that again? I can put that into the bike shedding section so we have that breadcrumb for future reference. Thank you.
I think you might be referencing that, yeah, the HackMD doc that I just shared here. Let me know if that makes sense. The audit policies.
I think so. Yeah. If this was, the being able to almost like that ESLint style approach where this is it. Okay, awesome, cool. I thought so maybe you'd mentioned it was an issue, so but okay, yeah.
Haven't made an issue in our new RC for it, but this essentially is the precursor to one. So yeah, okay. Feel free to also add to it if you want. Like that's a working doc that everybody can jump in and poke at.
Cool, thanks.
No worries. And let me know if you don't have access to it or you can't edit. I think you should be able to. Something to.
Yeah, looks good for me here.
Cool. Awesome. Moving on to the PR 6.6. So this is the RFC for linking packages to their source and build. I know there's been a lot of discussion here even the last week or so. I think there's been another 50 some odd comments added since last week. So I'm not sure if you want to give a quick update, Phil, from your side. I know you've been trying to keep up to date and I think trying to update the RFC along the way. Not sure if you had any quick updates for us.
Yeah, I think most of the comments are around either why can't I use my laptop to sign things, and the other side is kind of different limitations of CI/CD. So one recent comment was for packages that create binaries for different platforms and actually ship those with the package. Some of those platforms might not be supported by most CI/CD providers. So how do you sign these bills and actually include these binaries? I don't actually have a great answer to that yet because we haven't actually thought about that. If you can build it on CI/CD, you could obviously sign it. But if you need to like pre-build the binary on some other machine and then like ship it somewhere and then get it signed on CI/CD, that starts to get a bit complex. But I think it is kind of unearthing an unsolved problem in NPM, as far as I understand. Like it's there is no standard way of shipping pre-built binaries in packages.
Yeah, Jordan, I see your hands up, and then Miles.
Yeah, if Miles is a direct response, you can go ahead first. I have more of a broader response.
Yeah, this was a direct response. Thank you, Jordan. So for binaries and the distribution of binaries, I know that we have some RFCs that are thinking about how we make that a bit more official. I know some other people have been using patterns where they like publish other dependencies and those become kind of optional dependencies. And in theory, like those optional dependencies could then in turn be signed. I think that there's kind of two different things, and I'm leaning towards this maybe being for now out of scope. A lot of the stuff that happens here is via a post install script. There's all sorts of things that can be dynamically done with a post install script. So I think that like we should maybe be clear that like the warranty and what we cover with the signing is like what comes with the package, not maybe what it dynamically gets afterwards. Not saying that we shouldn't also solve that, but there's any number of different things that can be happening dynamically. And then I guess like the only other thing we could think of then would be whether or not we think it's appropriate to sign anything that does anything dynamically after install. So there is a world in which we could say, if you have a post install script or if you have a lifecycle script that runs when you publish, you just can't sign it. Now, the other one that we've talked about that to me, I think is a little bit more reasonable is we talk about kind of like the SLSA certification where like if you're running in a verified builder and you're a little bit locked down, then you could have that like higher level of verification. And so that's maybe where I think that makes a lot more sense. I don't think that we should be like signing something, even if it does something dynamic, does in my opinion, offer a benefit. But we don't want people to think that it's a panacea. So I don't want us to be too paternalistic and say, hey, you need to like fit into all of these criteria in order to sign. Like we already have a lot of requirements just by having to be in CI that I think are setting a high enough bar there. But I do think that we should think about like, I really like the idea of SLSA or other certification that we can offer to the package if you're not doing these dynamic things. And that RFC that Darcy included is about how we could kind of formalize these binary extensions. And so like if you formalize the binary extensions using this pattern, then you could get that better certification. And then we can allow folks to decide if they want to like install packages that have that certification or don't have that certification.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so more of a, this is much more of a broader comment. I think I'm getting a lot of, I'm seeing a lot of what I think are conflicting messages in some of the back and forth, extensive back and forth on the PR. So like maybe I'm misreading, but so if the intention is to essentially force all of the process, the entire chain from repo, like from a specific Java repo to the published package, that entire thing has to be done exclusively within a trusted system so that provenance can be guaranteed. So the first thing is I want to question, is that the issue? Because if that's a requirement, then building outside of that system wouldn't be sufficient for the binaries, for example. And Miles's caveat of like, well, if there's post install scripts, it doesn't matter. Sure, that's fair. But like, there's a lot of packages that pre-build binaries and ship them to avoid post-install shenanigans. And in those situations, it seems like the pre-builds would have to be done inside some of the, whatever the system is considered trusted to maintain like the chain of custody for the package contents. But then that sort of leads me to a bigger philosophical question of like, what gets to qualify as trusted? And that word is even a little problematic because like there is a big difference between, like in the current world, you know, one perspective is, oh, it's anarchy. Anyone can do anything they want on their machine at any time. And that's fair. But like basically saying only corporate known entities that have a lot of money and can create a CI system are allowed to be the vehicles for packages to be published and considered safe seems problematic to me, like from a lot of different perspectives, philosophical, political, socioeconomic, and so on. And it sort of feels to me like CAPTCHAs, which were an attempt to stop spam, but are really like a flawed approach. Like it's like CD keys for Windows. Like it just makes things harder for everyone trying to be legitimate, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. It just forces all the bad actors to go through the other gaping security holes in the process. And so I'm wondering if there's like, you can right now look at most packages on NPM, and with a lot of resources, which aren't cheap, you can verify that the contents of the package are definitely like originating from the repo contents with some degree of certainty, where packages without a build process, it's 100, and packages with a build process, it'll vary. So let's say from 90 to 100, I don't know. And you could, I suspect that any of the legitimate packages that fell below a certain confidence level could go through human review and are probably not likely to be legitimate. That requires no change to the build process. That requires no trusted systems or provenance guarantee. That's just verification of the package. All you need as input is access to the repo and access to the tarball, and you can, and some knowledge about the ecosystem, and you can get there. So I'm wondering if maybe there, like, what thought has been put into that type of approach, a sort of like as it relates to spam and CAPTCHAs, a like server-side behavior analysis approach instead of a like let's put hoops in front of people, in front of users approach to solving the kind of the problems that Salsa is attempting to solve.
Cool. I don't know who was first. Sorry, maybe I'll let you go.
Philip's first. I lowered and re-raised my hand. So
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely legitimate issues with kind of supporting only trusted or certain CI providers, which are currently commercial. Of which ones are supported, like the current idea is using the things that are supported by Sigstore's Falsio service, which is an open source project, to kind of alleviate some of those issues, because that would be a vendor neutral project that any platform could be added to if they just meet certain requirements for minting OIDC ID tokens, being able to set a custom audience, and ideally include some extra claims about the source repo. That would be like one. That would be what is considered trusted. It's more like what is really supported, and it would have to be in some way stable. I think it would be hard to support kind of ephemeral or private CI systems, for example, with that approach.
Miles, do you want to add as well?
Yeah, like I have a couple different notes here that I wanted to mention. So I might go all over the place for a second, but I'm attempting to answer a few of the concerns that were raised by Jordan. So I think, Jordan, the thing that we're talking about here, there's kind of like two parts, right? There's the signature, which we're relying on Sigstore as kind of the infrastructural piece of doing it. And then we have like the attestation of the build, right? And so in my personal opinion, the attestation is actually the more interesting thing than the signature. The signature is just how we trust that. And so in order to do it, we need to set up like a chain of custody that can be trusted. And as we were evaluating the different technologies and the different ways of doing it, one of the things that we started with was that like we did not believe self-managed keys could be a like real solution here based on the history of PGP, and we could get into a bunch of different things there. Now, the next thing that we could have looked at, which other proposals explored, was like SSO, right? Like how do we actually associate identity? And then that starts to get into like identity issues. It's not any better than build systems because we're like now based on SSO and sign in and like GitHub accounts are like specific accounts. I think like the important thing to keep in mind here is like what we're trying to talk about here is the starting point, not necessarily the finishing point of signing an infrastructure and attestation. And so I think that when we looked at it and tried to think about what are the things that Sigstore has, how can we mint a trusted signing key that is short living? The build infrastructure, and more particularly, trusted build infrastructure from the Sigstore project kind of was the best at the intersection of all of these things that we were looking for, while still being able to have a level of trust. And while I trust you, Jordan, personally, that your machine is probably fine, you also ran npm install on it once. So I don't know, right? Like it's kind of like, it's hard to know. And one of the things about the build infrastructure, it has a lot less to do with the fact that it's like Google or GitHub or any of these vendors. Is that like, there's certain things that we know to be true about this infrastructure that we can trust. So I think like with that in mind, I don't think that anyone is against the idea of kind of like expanding or finding other ways to have that same level of trust. I just think for solving the problem initially, like that is a really clear place to start that met all of the requirements of what we wanted with pseudo anonymity, reliability, scalability, and lack of vendor lock. Like the fact that it isn't just a GitHub solution and the fact that other vendors can grow. And you did mention like big vendors, but I mean, like we want to work with folks like Circle CI or other smaller vendors. And I don't think that there's any reason why, you know, a startup or an independent infrastructure company that could meet the qualifications of Sigstore, which is, you know, a Linux Foundation stewarded open project, you know, would be able to get there. So it's like we're trying to act in best effort, but at a certain point, you need to just make some decisions or you never build anything. And I guess the other thing that I wanted to point out, like related to this, is, you know, like some of the real value here, in my opinion, isn't even necessarily like the build attestation that we're talking about, even though I said that's where the value is. It's like in identifying change over time. So I personally am skeptical that we would find ourselves in a place where your entire tree of NPM packages is going to be signed anytime in the near future. And I'm not saying that to be negative about this effort, but I'm just trying to be realistic about the combinatorial complexity of deep transitive dependency graphs. What is useful, though, is if a handful of my direct dependencies or the things that are the most important are signed, that if when I go to update them, they're no longer signed or there's significant changes, that I can audit that, I can see that, I can be warned about that, I can be given an early signal. Or alternatively, if I find out later down the line that something weird was going on, I can go and have some sort of provenance or record that I can audit to figure out how the hell did this thing happen. Most of like the worst security incidents that we've seen on NPM aren't because of like, you know, random malware that's published. It's because of an account takeover that resulted in like a post-installed script getting added that executed malware. If we have a way through these signatures to like validate that like, hey, this is coming from the same place it always comes from. Now, to your point, if someone hacks someone's GitHub account and they push a commit and they put it through the build infrastructure, if they physically grabbed their machine and was able to pretend to be that person, it may still get through, but that's why we have defense in depth. That's why we have malware scanning. That's why we're interested in exploring ways of identifying changes to scripts. We're interested in identifying changes to ways that things hit system interfaces. None of these single solutions are going to solve everything, but what to me, like this RFC brings us to, which is like steps above where we are today, is like that, like you said, oh yeah, we can go through and we can audit all the things. Yeah, we could. No one's going to do that. This makes it like really streamlined and easy to do. Cool. And longer term, as you were talking about, if we had something like reproducible builds, which is another thing that we're talking about, maybe we could come up with something where we could offer some sort of notarization for a reproducible build. But I see that as distinct and different from signing something that comes from well-known build infrastructure. These are all things that can be notarized on a package independently.
So I don't disagree with any of the things you said. Can I propose a slightly altered order that might be helpful? The first thing would be, we could make NPM publish or the NPM registry, put something in Sigstore saying this is the contents of the package and this is the SHA it's claiming to be at the time of publish. That can be done right now and like doesn't inconvenience largely anybody except perhaps some registries or the Sigstore team or something. And of course, that leaves the question of how do you trust that that claim is correct? But at least then the claims are starting to be recorded. And then in parallel, two different things are worked on. One is create a way for people to self-sign in a trusted system, and then the provenance information is also attached, but also create a separate system that can, for the top 100 packages and then 1,000, in the same way you rolled out two-factor, right? Like they can gradually backfill all of those signatures and do a build process, and then say, now this backfill system is attesting that this is the SHA that it's receiving. Like it won't catch everything, but it would catch the majority. Like what
you're proposing,
that approach?
What you're proposing is a completely different thing that we could also explore, but we should discuss on its own merit. Backfilling is not on the table for this because you can't backfill build out attestation. And what you're talking about implementing here is not radically different than what we already do by capturing the SHA sum in the packet in the document, aside from the fact that we would publish that to a third party, right? Like it misses what I think is important and unique about this proposal, which is that like that signature, that snapshot, everything that's happening, we're not actually doing that, right? And that's part of the reason why the trusted builder is so important, why having a third party that we know we could trust is important. That's where the signature is happening. That's where the snapshot is happening. We're not doing it. So we have those signatures on our end already. I mean, we sign things already. We take snapshots on the SHA sum. In my mind, what you're suggesting is more or less like that, but publishing that to a third party, which is not a bad idea. But
the initial part,
what this proposal accomplishes that's different from that is before those assets even touch us, right? An attestation has been published saying like, this is what I'm publishing to the registry. Then we publish something saying this is what was published to the registry, and then those things are matched up. That is the gap that we don't have right now. You have to trust us. I mean, like, I'll tell you, hey, man, you could trust us.
Right.
But like, that is kind of like the additional thing that's being added here.
So
I think the point that I've been unable to verbalize real quick before I silence myself is that the goal here seems to not really be it was built in a trusted CI system. The goal seems to be finding a way to reliably measure, is the code in the tarball like an accurate reflection of the intention in the repo?
No, that's a part of it. How it was created is just as important, right? Like how we get from commit to thing.
If the contents in the package are good, like let's say they match the repo exactly, why does it matter how it's created? It's exact. There's no build process. It's 100% safe.
Most packages are not going to be one-to-one, even if it's just through like ignoring specific files or publishing from a workspace. That is such a small edge case. It's not really like.
But I mean, but even with the build process, right? Like it still seems to me like the goal is making sure nobody snuck anything in. If they run.
That's a very negative view on it. It's about having a history of how these things were created and where they were created from.
Okay. I'll think about that. Thank you.
So quickly, I know, Zach, I saw your hand up for a while, and I want to make sure that you had a chance to jump in if you wanted to. Did you not? Did most
No, that's okay. Yeah, I think a lot of the things I was going to say was covered in the conversation.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I apologize there. Also want to just poke at this as well. Much of what you're saying, Mal, too, is the introduction of the third party is definitely has been the most interesting part of this for me. And I say interesting as in the most poignant piece to me, which has always been contentious, actually, introducing a third party that we trust. So, and today, I already consider there to be a third party within the current flow of signing and verification, and that third party is your offline cache today. So a log file which caches signatures and essentially the attestation post installation essentially acts as sort of a secondary source of truth, which you can store anywhere you want. And this also includes registry mirrors that exist today. There's sort of a number of different existing parts of the NPM ecosystem, which I think are not or which are unique to other sort of package ecosystems today, in the fact that we do allow for mirroring, and then potentially there are already third parties that we can use as sort of sources of truth, which is why when document signing was first proposed, a year or so ago, that was sort of the lens that I was looking at that RFC, which sort of also would curtail the need for a net new third party like Sigstore. For me personally, this is all my personal understanding of this. So, you know, I think I see where Jordan's coming from in terms of the perspective of, you know, what's the value we're getting out of tracking back exactly where something came from. Especially for me, you know, build attestations are tracking, you know, something that is potentially mutable. And if we go into and we dig into the idea of us trying to assert that we are, by doing this work, we are going to get closer to, let's say, SALSA level 3 compliance, which, by the way, is there isn't right now any sort of criteria or accreditation for us to actually meet and be compliant, which I feel is a bit premature for us to even be having a conversation about SALSA, you know, compliance. But because we bring it up here, you know, for us to be compliant there, you have to be able to say that, you know, you can audit, you know, the audit the source. And the problem is that what we are linking here is a mutable source. So workflows and actions and repos can be deleted and removed. And so there's no real, we can't actually make an attestation that you can go and actually reliably audit the source from the package artifact because we don't know if somebody is going to remove it once it's been built. So we have essentially a record in that is saying that this thing existed at some time, but it can link to something that goes away, meaning that we might have broken links in the future of that reference the source build. So that to me is kind of also a crux of what is the value that we're providing here and how close are we going to actually get to trying to be this sort of like getting closer to this sort of compliant state. And another crux of this discussion, I think, is around the concept that the SALSA standard that we're trying to meet also is not transitive. And so I shared that with folks here. They can go check out the FAQ about SALSA and the fact that it's not transitive. And I think a lot of people within at least the NPM ecosystem, a lot of us maintainers and consumers alike, really do care about the transitive nature of sort of the safety of our packages, right? And so if there's a vulnerable dependency within that chain, I really want to know about that. And so that's very important, that actually the things apply to transitively, and that my trust is of a package is going to be dictated by its own dependencies, right? Like, you know, if I know that, you know, we could go back to, what is it, it's not Wolf of Wall Street, but, you know, like when they're talking about what your mortgages are all part of, and it's like BBAA, and they're talking about, you know, like this whole thing is full of, you know, garbage, like these garbage mortgages and lenders, you know, allowing you to have garbage mortgages into something that's consolidated. Like if you know that packages dependencies are completely unchecked, build that to say, yeah, The Big Short, thanks, Doug. But if you know that packages has you can't trust it at all because of its dependencies, or let's say pre-builds or those types of things, I don't think we're providing much value. And I think when we are talking about getting to the SALSA, the highest SALSA level compliance, which is SALSA level 4 in the hermetic builds, like it's almost like impossible to say that you can't, like you need to be able to attest that your dependencies can be are signed, or they are the exact same thing, to essentially have reproducible builds. If you have mutability in your build, you cannot reliably recreate a package or an artifact, right? You cannot rely, if you have something that's going to be a bit flipper in your actions workflow, it's not reliably going to do it, like provide anything for you in terms of like an audit trail. So, you know, I think we are definitely exposing some of the really sort of, I don't consider them being edge cases. I consider them to be fundamental issues with what we're trying to do here. And we just, I think myself included, I'm concerned about how we market this and how we tell end users this is providing a level of safety or security to them, when I know also that there's other things we could be doing, which are actually, in that last mile of protecting against things. And I think, Miles, you spoke to it a little bit about, you want to use this as a safety, as a mechanism to create a heuristic around, authors have been added to help maintain, or the publishing mechanism has changed, and those can be used as heuristics for me to intelligently, block or gate things. And I think that is, again, sort of orthogonal of this, where it's essentially more in line with what we were talking before this RFC, which is sort of audit policies to gate, to apply my own sort of heuristics around what I do and don't trust at the consumer level. But I don't know if actually like this work is going to give me that much information, other than the fact that I knew at some point this build existed, like this build environment existed, and that somehow it produced, like this package. And I don't know why. I still don't understand why necessarily we need the third party, unless we have loftier goals unless we're trying to do something more than just what this RFC is, which is to align with a whole bunch of other ecosystems and have a centralized source of truth for this kind of information, which deviates from the current source of truth for this ecosystem, which is the registry. So Zach, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out a way to kind of succinctly describe what I've heard so far. So I'm not sure what order we should put these in, but it sounded like, generally speaking, there's kind of three goals that we're trying to achieve. One is creating a public audit log about how something was built, which I don't believe is a capability that we have other ways of doing today. Another is linking a package back to its source or repo, and we've talked about there potentially being more than one way to achieve that. And then the third is to kind of like distribute risk, or like publish this information more broadly than just something managed by NPM, to kind of raise the bar for someone to compromise and tamper with the system. And so I think one thing that's, I don't know, unique or interesting about this proposal is that it has broad applicability to kind of those three things. And we could talk about different ways to accomplish those three goals, or we could talk about different ways to kind of like buttress and like add additional support for them. But I think a lot of the value we're talking about here is sort of like, one system that kind of helps us achieve three goals. We do need to think more about what happens if the linked source or repo is renamed or deleted. I think that is unlikely to be the common case, but it is certainly possible. And so, especially on the consuming side, we would need to think about like whose responsibility it would be to verify that resource still exists. Maybe it's the registry, maybe it's the end user. We have some kind of unanswered questions there. I couldn't resist though saying that of course the World Wide Web has a lot of broken links, but that doesn't mean that the World Wide Web doesn't have value.
That's a great comment there. I'll succeed to that statement for sure. Great. I was trying to capture the three goals: create public audit log, linking a package back to its source, and sorry, the third one you said there, Zach.
Yes, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I got them all. So creating a public audit log as to how something was built, linking a package back to its source repo, and then distributing package signatures to a third party to kind of raise the bar at what it would take to compromise the system and like forge information.
Okay, great. Philip, did you want to jump in?
Yes. So the way I've been thinking about it is like one of the things we're doing is introducing some kind of signature outside of NPM. So the proposal talks about creating a signature on a build system, but we could be creating it on a developer's machine, or anywhere outside of NPM, like before it actually hits NPM. And there are like a few just benefits to just doing that. You get some kind of integrity guarantees if NPM was compromised, for example. The other question is how do you actually sign those things? I think a couple of people have already touched on that, like downsides of using self-managed keys. So then we're kind of talking about what kind of identities are we supporting. And this proposal lays out workflow identities as the identity. But in my mind, the proposal is also laying the groundwork for supporting any number of identities in the future. And I also see one of the nice side effects of using something like Sigstore. I saw your question in the chat, Darcy, about like the registry could add its own ledger. One of the nice benefits of using something like Recall, which is a publicly accessible ledger, is that any third-party NPM registry, for example, could just use that. So having support for this feature would be a lot easier for third parties. So they wouldn't need to like host all this other extra infrastructure. And it also creates a bit of kind of vendor neutral, a vendor neutral space where both on the identity side, like maybe some other identity would bubble up and become like the most popular one that all maintainers want to use. And then that gets added to FileZero and then NPM can support it. The other thing that's being floated in the RFC is like around creating events for things in the ledger. So this proposal is, we're creating two events here. We're creating hey, this is built on this repo and this build system. And then the NPM registry will also sign the package when it gets released. So we can kind of see that there's two different events. And one of the benefits is, as Miles brought up, detecting changes to these things becomes a lot easier. So for example, when doing upgrades, you can be like, oh, cool, the repo changed. I'm going to check that out because that doesn't look right. But in future, we could be publishing more events to the ledger, like maintainer added, changed, these kind of events, and they could be added to the ledger in a way that any different package managers could also add them in the same format. And this was also brought up by, I can't remember who was in the RFC, but there's been some talk in the OpenSSF securing package repos working group about standardizing on the set of events that a registry could emit to a log like Recall. And then if you are a really security conscious company and you want to actually like monitor this log, and you might be using PyPy, RubyGems, NPM dependencies in all your projects, so you could write one monitor and keep track of anything that's happening on all these different registries.
I know we're getting close to the time. I'm not sure if any other folks want to add any other commentary before we break off here. Want to again thank everybody for jumping on again, and I know that we'll probably continue the discussion in the RFC. I apologize I haven't been as active in the last week since our last talk, but I'll try to get some of the thoughts that I shared here today back in the RFC itself in comments, and then yeah, hopefully continue to round that out. Phil, anything you want to say before we go?
No, yeah, I'll also try to summarize some of these things and respond to anything that comes up in the RFC.
Cool. Thank you again for everybody that jumped on today. I will post the meeting notes as I usually do shortly after this call. And then the recording is also available and should be linked in the issue. Hopefully we can keep this on the agenda and chat next week as well. And Roy, I know you had some folks from your org that want to join, so hopefully they can make the time next week. Let me know if we need to schedule a different day or time just to get more broader broader org participation as well. So
Sounds good. Thanks.
cool. Thank you so much, and I'll see you folks next week.